Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 39. Now, you remember Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, has been sold into slavery because of his brother's jealousy. And we remember in the last chapter, while Joseph is in slavery, we got this story about Judah's lust and sin and shame. And though he repented, it reminds us how screwed up and imperfect this family is and why we need someone who can deliver us from the power of sin and the power of death. Now, Joseph's story, serving as the climax of Genesis, shows us a glimpse of what this person might actually look like. Right? In comparison to Judah, Joseph is going to act really righteously. He's going to reject that lust. He's going to reject that shame. And he's going to act arguably more righteously than any character we've seen so far, except for maybe Noah. And what does he get for all this righteousness? It's not what you would expect. God's promises and rewards, while a surety, are not necessarily on our timetable. That's what this element of the story of Joseph is going to teach us here in Genesis chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And the master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer over the house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned, in the house and in the field. Right, so Joseph isn't dead, and he's actually doing really well. God is blessing him with success and riches, just like he did to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Only this time, he's not increasing his own possessions, but he's increasing the possessions of the person he was made a servant to, which was Potiphar. And it's comparable to that time in Jacob's exile when he was increasing Laban's flocks. Joseph's faithfulness to Potiphar, and ultimately his faithfulness to God, allows him to work himself up and find favor in the eyes of Potiphar so that he makes him in charge of everything in his house. Now, we all have areas of our lives where sometimes we're Joseph and sometimes we're Potiphar, right? Sometimes we have to answer to someone else's authority. We have to respect our parents, right? We have to obey our bosses and our employers and our managers. But we also have areas of our lives where we're like Potiphar, and we have to be able to find people like Joseph that we can entrust our stuff to, that we can let take care of things for us. We should always be serving and obeying faithfully people who entrust us to take care of things for them. And we should also be looking for faithful people to entrust the things we need taken care of to them and trust that they will get it taken care of, right? And when we take all of that in the context of our spiritual walk and our sanctification, that's what discipleship is. We all have mentors who help us, guide us towards godliness, and people that we are mentoring and guiding towards godliness. So he, Potiphar, left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there did not concern himself with anything except for the food he ate. So Potiphar trusts Joseph so much that he doesn't concern himself with anything in the house. Now, it's good that he has a servant like Joseph that he can trust 100%, but not concerning himself with anything in his house, that's going to sow seeds for disaster. Literally, that word concern means he didn't know anything in his house. Now, that same word, to know, is also sometimes in the Bible used as a euphemism for relations between a man and a woman. Back in chapter 4, Adam knew his wife, Eve, and they conceived a child. So if Potiphar doesn't know anything in his house, he's probably not knowing his wife. And it makes what happens next make even more sense. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came about after these things that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." Let's look at it from her perspective. There's Joseph, this young, successful, handsome man who's in charge and actually concerned with everything that's going on in her house. And then you have Potiphar, who is her husband, but he's never home. He doesn't care about what's going on in his home. He hasn't known her in a while, right? If you remember all the way back to chapter 3, we talked about that slow burn of moral corruption, how it's not just one decision instantly that causes you to ruin your life. It's little decisions over time that one at a time build on each other, and you end up in this huge mess of moral decay. And that's what the whole book of Genesis has been about so far. But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" So Joseph refuses. And that's a big deal, because if we look at the story so far, none of the other men in Genesis have come to this kind of moral stance. Just in the last chapter, we talked about Judah having sex with Tamar, and that was the person he wronged, and he initiated it. Now, in contrast, Potiphar's wife is the one coming on to Joseph here, and he's done nothing but increase her wealth, right? He's done nothing but take care of her. And notice how it parallels the stories of Jacob and Abraham too, right? They both had times where their wives came to them saying, "Please have sex with my slave," right? They could have said no. They could have refused, just like Joseph, but they didn't have that moral backbone, I guess. In contrast, here's the wife coming on to the slave, Joseph. And the slave, the subordinate, refuses her advance. If the slave, Joseph, could have done that, then Jacob and Abraham, the patriarchs, definitely could have. Joseph is proving himself to act more righteously than any of his brothers, any of his fathers, who have all been placed in really similar scenarios and have all made the wrong choice. Now let's also look at Joseph's reason for saying no. He says his master has given him everything except for her. Does that sound like anything? It reminds me of the Garden of Eden, where God told Adam and Eve, "You can have anything you want. Everything here is for you and for your good, except for that one tree. That's poison. Don't eat of it." Joseph is rejecting his own knowledge of good and evil, and he is choosing to embrace everything Potiphar has blessed him with and given him with. He's making the opposite choice of Adam and Eve. And he even says as much, right? He says, sleeping with Potiphar's wife wouldn't just be sinning against Potiphar, it would be sinning against God. As she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now look, this is so real, right? Joseph can't just say no and be applauded as a righteous hero, right? He has to deal with this temptation every day. And that's just like all of us, right? We all have to endure that temptation and say no every day to whatever vice it is, because we live in this broken world. It just doesn't stop. It's relentless. But when we trust in Jesus, right, we believe that through his cross and resurrection, he has dealt with the powers of sin and death. When we live by God's wisdom in the Spirit he's indwelt in us, we're able to reject sin's foothold in our lives. And Joseph never gives in. Unlike everyone else in this story, Joseph makes the stance and says, "No, I am going to live by the word of God." And guess what that gets him? Reward? No. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household were there inside. She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, she called to the men of the household and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us. He came into me to lie with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside." So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came into me to make sport of me. And as I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Now when his master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. And so we have that famous scene, right, where Joseph has done nothing wrong, but Potiphar's wife grabs his garment and is able to use it to deceive the men of the household and Potiphar himself. Now maybe Potiphar would have been able to smell out that lie a little bit better if he had been concerned with anything that was happening in his house, but we'll never know. And Joseph innocently suffers the consequences for all of it. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him, and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all of the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. So we see even in jail, God doesn't abandon Joseph. He keeps doing exactly what he was doing before, blessing Joseph, giving him favor with his authorities, and giving him opportunities to prove himself as faithful. Whether it's with his family in Canaan, or in the house of Potiphar, or in the jail he was wrongly thrown into, God continues to bless Joseph and to use him. And Joseph, for his credit, keeps making the right choices with these opportunities. That leads to more blessing and to more opportunities to show himself faithful. And so it looks like we finally have somebody who gets it, right? He gets what it means to be in the image of God. But regardless, just like 2 chapters ago, Joseph continues to suffer blamelessly. And here at the bottom of an Egyptian prison, rotting away, while your father is grieving for you and your brothers who sold you into slavery are living in sin and depravity, it would be easy to give up. And Joseph doesn't. He knows that God's promises and God's rewards are on God's timetable, not our own. And every day through our various temptations, we have the same choice to make. Even if it means innocently suffering, we should choose righteousness, reject sin, and know that eventually it will lead to God's blessing and reward. Thanks for watching 1189. Have a good day. God bless.